today what we call a river gathering. And CILX radio in Alacrosse is also rebroadcasting on their FM transmission. So along with streaming on YouTube and Facebook. And this initiative we're brought together by Zoom as we all see each other here and hear each other. But as part of the river gathering, it's a call for our communities to work together, to come together, to hear each other. But in the north, we're surrounded by 4 treaty areas. We have Treaty 8, Treaty 10, Treaty 6, and Treaty 5. And that covers the Northern Administrative District. So this is a call for our communities that are represented in families by our elders, our youth, our men and women. So all inclusive, everybody matters. And what you have to share, ideas or concerns, this is an opportunity, what we call a river gathering, is to flow together to create an energy so we can create a safe and joyful life on our rivers and lakes that we live in the north up here. But health is a big issue. We're recovering from the pandemic and all its efforts and vaccinations and lockdowns that we experienced, but also looked at our vulnerabilities that we had with the health system, the inadequacies of our health structure that we may have in our neck of the woods or in some communities where there's inequities in regions. But the north is where our heart is, and that's where we call home, Taskim No. And so we usually open our sessions with a prayer, and we're being joined today by our elder from Sagitawak, Jerry Gardner. Jerry has agreed to open up a prayer. He's a pipe carrier from Treaty 10 here. And today, Jerry, if you see our screen, we're being joined by Robin Hill from Northern Labrador, from the Innu lands, and Dr. David Poon is our medical health officer that joins us and gives us our status of our health issues in our region. But Jerry, if you're ready, nigan peak screen. We may have you muted. You have to unmute your screen there, Jerry.
I'm here to treat for bed bugs. Isn't it great?
There's a mute at the bottom, a little microphone on the bottom left. And if you press on that, it should unmute you.
Well, if you really stretch that,
not yet.
Find a place of his own.
Oh, I heard you there. Yeah, Jerry, I could hear something.
Hello.
Hey, with the.
Okay.
Tell him to report at 0900 hours, and it's his day to bring muffins.
That's it.
There, I can hear you.
Okay. Nice to meet all of you. Bertanigan kagi kuhan sige naman.
Yeah, Gagi Machistan, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Kapagagishman. Tamanga pinsan nanashkom na ogafio. Nanashkom gistarik with me. Pixio shon. If more time not one. Then nanashkom tiniego. I'm on Chaga Peak Tascino. Why? Nagagais mo synopsis. Nigusta. Nanihiyogagis mo. Nigusta. Sinong to? Pichigisigo. I thank you for this day to see another sunrise and to start a new fire this morning. To warm the body and the soul.
I'm so sorry, Lucky. I'm
This is the next time. This morning I woke up and I thought about the young people and for those that are yet unborn. You know, I prayed that they too may have the opportunity to enjoy life and its blessings. Iwan mamo tawe mo kinanas kum tinanas kagisagak. Gutta mina piego ispuis kanawea ispuitia. Tamiup muhta tama kumap muhtion. Iptaga kapmagawa tama tagaskita ya pestam chimnama. Ang magagis migusia kagis miga ko mamo tawe mo simanto. Dapat sihtat ktuas misno. Minat tahke mam terima ako. Uskay sino agnogo. Kaya pichagay ganit tawagechik. Miste na nas komunuta naskagiska. Miste na nas komun. Ogisgo kagiwa kwamuta magagimiwa. Ogisgo kaganuemwa. Taksknutewa. Tapatsta taksknutewa. Ktihina kotse. Ktihina. Kamigia kistanopsis kakskitamaki. Tamahminosta kigoi. Tamahminosta magia. Mistake mamtani tamoyo no taskino. Nippi. Minuma yuten kai hit tama. Kahkio. Iguneni mamtani tamoyo. Tagaskita kaya petso tiet nigan. Tagaskita, talaspita ta mini huagan da domini kuya ni pisaga gani. Taihia. Igay ta pichupuak. Igay ta pichupu ta pichupuas misno. Yuksan mais epoximuan. Fisha epoxi tamanum. Umamis kano. Stehe na naskomun. Stehe naskomun nuya. Yapits. Magagoti ochigiti pot nkap muaskas kamen. Kagis migo set kiste. Kagis kiste masot. Apitagis no koche. Apiktap mia. Piwichinan. Mina paksamota. Mina kiwit no. Mina tisagastino. Mina samansagisagano. Kahkio na naskohtin. Today I pray to all the things that give us life in this world. And this is the way I pray. This is the way it was taught to me. I pray to the sun. I pray to the waters. I pray to the air. I pray to the life force that was given to us by our Almighty. I pray for all of you, all our children, all our people, everywhere. Nanashkumten mamota mo. Hey, get now.
Hey.
Thank you, Jerry. In your prayer, you're asking for our youth and our environment and our land and all the sources of life to be clean, to be prepared for our children to come. Maybe in your own words, however you can express it, what is our status of our communities now? What is the status of our families today in our relationship to our responsibilities to our land and waters? It's not only rights we're talking about, it's also responsibilities. So tansige kuhtsapahtin ta ihtapia mi watso magiwag pagamskago no iwogi to get the sokato skatama.
We've always we've always been taught, well, I have always been taught, and most of us have been taught that, you know, we've lost the sacredness of what gives us life. We've lost, well, not quite, I shouldn't say lost. There's some of us that still have understand the sacredness of what gives us life. You know, water, without water, we wouldn't survive. Without the clean air, we'd have a hard time. Without the things, the natural elements that give us life. Iwan misteto, iwan pat naman na to statue, iwan ay kutakiwa. And that sacredness, I think we have to come back to that. Not to leave that sacred behind, but to always be in the back of our minds. We've kind of put that sacredness aside. You go to that question.
The sacred journey that we have to walk on. I know this colonial world people have come to take our lands, our resources, and we live on Treaty 10 in our region here, but there is a way that we can live together. Dansik to sapa tinuan dansiti is mamo kaita tiskagoya, but kista no the sukhagapo yakoma taksnahamwa hoktu simna nagapitsa stamohtitsik. The teachings must carry on to the next generation. But how do we navigate through this dual world of the modern world and our traditional worlds?
Iwan mapupugo pwede na kakyo kishinota michete shino kota kapchigo kakyo apstoanano. All of us, we grew up with that, hearing that from our elders. Oh, we got to get back to that. That's the way we've we got to get back to the sharing part and the caring part, the caring of each other. We got to have that. That's why we brought up. We were brought up to have compassion. That's how we were brought up as kids. I've heard it lots of times from my parents, my grandparents. You have to be, kind toward people. I think we go a long ways in this world. The new trail that we're trying to blaze into a future, like it's hard not to say, but we're kind of in the last stages of something that's not good. We have to continue on doing this.
Thank you, Jerry. I know living on the land, living off the fish and the moose, the ducks, this is springtime. This is a good time to think of a new life as the pussy willows away to our trees, the medicines start coming out. This is why we call this river gathering. In days past, you would have to canoe many miles to get to a congregation of people. But with technology now, this is what we're testing out. We're testing this Zoom, the YouTube, the Facebook. We're utilizing all these that connects our people to bring our minds together, and communication could heal some of these dangers that you're saying. We see the bad results of bad decisions, and then we were told of after the pandemic that we would have mental health issues, addiction issues, and that's what we're realizing today in our communities. Jerry, if
yeah.
you don't mind, I'm going to flip over to Labrador. This young gentleman that's joined us, his name is Robin Hill, and just to share a view from his camp. He's in northern Labrador in a community, Chisisu, I'm
Is
not
that the
sure.
same? It used to be in Laurent?
He used to be in Laurent, yeah. He used to be here at Natuftawin newspaper. I see Linda Campbell has joined us. Linda would very well know the Robin Hill. So Robin, if you want to greet yourself or introduce yourself to us, and maybe kind of a status of your community and well-being from your neck of the woods. Oh, we got to ask you to unmute. Your mic was off. Oh, not yet. You got to unmute your, there you go.
I'm a klutz of computers. Yeah. Here, well, the people, my wife's father was born in 1900. And I think until 1915, they lived in conventional teepees. But I guess by 1915, the European influence had come in, so they were canvas tents then. When my wife was born, now the local people would still, like in the 50s and early 60s, would still be mostly nomadic, like following the animals. And there wasn't a permanent community established here until the 60s. And then, of course, things have changed a lot since then. People used to be hunting and fishing a lot. The caribou herd, they had a enormous caribou herd here, and they had the military practicing low-level flying back in the 80s, I guess. And the noise, I did a thesis on the effect of noise and on the caribou herds, and out of Dalhousie, environmental studies thesis, and animals. I came to the conclusion, like animals, basically in the long distance, were seeing with their ears. A low frequency noise travels a long, long way, and like in the bush, like for an animal who can really hear low frequency sounds. And so, like when you're drumming to call the caribou herds, that actually might work, because the low frequency sound would just carry so far, and other caribou could hear other animals from a long distance. Now, when we got highways through, and we had in the 80s, we had the low level flying. I remember there was a professor from St. Mary's, University in Halifax, who was studying. They had some collared caribou, and there was a map of Labrador with the low level flying zone there. And when the caribou got to the border of the low level flying zone, they just veered off. So, but with, with highways across Labrador now, and with different mines, different activities going on, the sound, people don't talk about it because you just don't see the animals anymore, and people are not as, like when I first came here, the older people were into hunting and trapping, and now the kids aren't, and they're struggling. Well, the language is still strong, but they're struggling to keep their language. I remember there was an old fella here when before roads and that, people used to travel by walking, and dear God, how fast. There's this one elderly gentleman when I came here back about 1980, and he would sometimes walking up down the road. Just amazing how fast they're going, because that's how they had to walk in the woods to get places. That was their mode of transportation a lot of times. And so the change has been dramatic. They're fighting to save the language. My daughter is fluent in Neumann, the language here, and the university in St. John's is trying to encourage her to become a big part of the linguistics department there, and to help with, I guess, with the preservation of the language. And so yeah, times change, and a lot more people up here, and like we're close. We're about 30 kilometers from the base at Happy Valley Goose Bay, which is the largest military base in northeastern North America. It's only 7,000 people. The community of Sheshiju is doubling about every 20 years. So when I came here, there were 500. After 20 years, there was 1,000. Now 20 years after that, there's 2,000 people, and every year there's 100 more right now. So there are a lot of issues about what the future is for the kids, and what's happening. I worked in adult basic education back, for 25 years with people from here and up the coast, Inuit as well. And there was quite we were there with the cod moratorium here in Newfoundland, and after the fishing was stopped, there was a lot of fishermen, mostly Newfoundlanders, right, who didn't have jobs after that. So they set up a lot of training, and they did some really good training sessions. Like I was in adult basic education for 25 years, and they set it up correctly. Like with adult education, the idea is you're trying to remove stress from people as they're getting through, instead of like putting stress on, oh, study, you got to sit right there. It's kind of moving stress, because people have bad memories. Often adults have bad memories of what their education experience was. So when they come back, if they've been out facing the real world, they know what it's like not to have an education. So when they come back and take adult basic education or some activity trying to get themselves back in to get some skills sets, the facilitators' main goal is to try to remove those stresses, not add stresses on. So and they did that. The AB program was individualized, competency based, self-directed, and yeah, it was competency based. It was a really good experience in changing times. Yeah, and there needs, you know, kids today need more opportunities.
Thank you, Robin. Robin joins us from Labrador. He had spent extensive time here in Beauval, has made many friendships here. But the situation in Labrador is much similar to a lot of our communities, our Cree, Dene, Métis communities. And we're also a circumpolar community. It's the northern boreal forest. So these are the same ecosystem, the Precambrian shield. And so much of what we're learning from each other and how we can support each other, I think that's why we're reaching out. And thanks for joining us, Robin. I'd like to call on, I see Linda Campbell has joined us. Linda has been an advocate for the women's, the Canadian woman, National Indigenous woman. And Linda, maybe from your perspective, Tansigix, how is our perspective on life that's happening in our communities? And any questions that you may have as well on health and community safety.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linda Campbell from Beauval, Saskatchewan. And I'm a president of the Women of the Swift Flowing River Cultural Network Incorporated. And we represent the Indigenous women of Saskatchewan. And we're interested in the health because most of the women have gone through a lot of medical trauma. We try and help the women find jobs, get educated, be more knowledgeable about topics like this, health, politics, and stuff. And we just got started last October, and I look forward to hearing from your views and get more information so I can pass them down to the women. And it's been interesting. And one thing I like about it is because of that, they were talking about infertilization, like women not having any more babies. Like, where did that come from? And I'm glad it's just started to be talking about that, because I think it's part of that woman not bearing children, so we will stop Native people being born. So I'm glad it's up in the air, and hopefully we have some say about that and talk about it, the unfairness of what women issues are. And it's nice to see Robin, because she used to be good at the newspaper. And I look forward to hearing from each one of you. I'll learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I think that's exactly what we're trying to do, is bring the issues up. We've heard from doctors' reports that even northern Saskatchewan, there's limited opportunity for maternity. The maternity wards are down south. Delivering a baby is one of our sacred roles as we have in our communities, but how capable, what's our capacity for the north? So I just want to bring in one of our medical health officers, that Dr. David, if you would join us. Dr. David is a medical health officer that works out of La Ronge. We've met with Dr. David Poon for many times. But Dr. David, if you don't mind giving us an update or giving us your perspective on the status of health in northern Saskatchewan and the reason why we're doing this communication as well.
I'm very grateful to all of you for your time. Please call me David. My full name is Dr. David Edward Uy Poon. Edward is my father's name. Uy is my mother's maiden name. I was born and raised in Regina, Saskatchewan. I completed my medical training in Toronto. And I'm currently the medical health officer for Northern Saskatchewan, so based out of La Ronge. What it means is because my fiance is here in Toronto, is I fly to La Ronge every month and stay for a week, but I'm still full-time working for the North. I'm very grateful for Rick. I'm very grateful for all of you to allow me this time. Medical health officers over the past couple of years have all been about vaccinations, and making sure that people wear masks and we close down the airports. That was all medical health officers were really known for in the past few years. My belief is that the next public health issue will be a mental health issue, addictions, pain, trauma. In addition to my day job at nighttime, I'm a psychotherapist in intergenerational trauma, addiction, substance use, adverse childhood experiences. I'm here to learn and see how I can best serve the community. My email address is davidpoon@saskhealthauthority.ca. I'll put it in the chat. But please, any way that I can best have an open dialogue with the community and contribute, I'd be very happy to. If later on you want to hear all about measles and vaccination rates, I'll tell you all about that. But right now, I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. David. I'm just going down the line. I don't have anybody having their hands up, but we have Norman Opikoku has joined us as well. So I don't know if Norman, if you're ready to make some comments on our status of our community health and our community safety issues that we have. But those of you that have joined us on Zoom, you can raise your hand here. I can identify you if you're ready to speak. On people listening on Facebook, if you want to comment on Facebook, we have an administrator. We have Dion Gauthier, who's monitoring the Facebook account, and whatever questions or comments that are coming from the Facebook world will be led to us with the chat box here on the Zoom. So hopefully we can connect that, and we're also live streaming on YouTube. So if those of you that aren't able to partake in all of these sessions, you can review the whole session on YouTube on CIPI Radio as well. So right now, CILX Radio is broadcasting live on their FM transmitter. So we're ready for more comments. If anybody else wants to say a few words or raise some questions, we got Norman Opikoku has joined us, as I said. Norman, noch die Pix Kwan Kistag, ich bin ich bin pogwin to tamagan, winanto. And we have Louis Gardner has also joined us. Louis, any comments at this time or any questions?
Answer Rick.
There you go. Oh,
Okay. But yeah, bitawan naman
yes.
20 stocks in.
Loud and clear, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. But anyways, good afternoon. My name is Louis Gardner. I guess my parents were traditional users, lived off the land. We didn't actually live in Isla Cross. It was about 10 kilometers from the community. But at some point in time that we were told that life was going to be better in town. And so they moved us all into a community, but they didn't tell us that it was going to cost us. So that was a surprising factor, but all in all, I guess in growing up in out in the bush life, I guess it's we got to learn how to be survivors, I guess, more or less. And so and I remember my dad used to tell us, use the environment, but respect it. So I never really knew what it meant, huh? So and up to this day, I still ponder on it and saying, well, what did he really mean? Using the environment. So all in all, I guess we just coming into rotation in terms of where's this all going as Rick's initiative in regards to the rivers gathering and some of the issues that we have now facing us in northern Saskatchewan. We have high cancer rates. You know, the environment is a big concern, like in regards to even forest fires. There's been a air quality report that was submitted just I think about a week ago, stating that we had higher rates than India because of the fire situation. So, you know, just a few of the stats in regards to health. Be interesting for us that Isle Lacrosse, through our Métis Local, applied for what we call was federal funding through the federal government, Environment Climate Change Canada. They're called the IPCA's Indigenous Protection Conservation Areas. And basically the mandate of what the community had chose was, how do we protect the environment? How do we protect the air? And how do we protect the water? And that's basically how the people, and how do we help industry, government, and us in managing it, because there's a key piece missing all the time. It's the communities and the indigenous people that are not involved in the management, the monitoring of this stuff. And so these are key challenges that I think we're going to have going forward. It's a 3-year project, and we had a lot of partners come on site. We had phase 1, which was a 2-year, but we had Nature Canada, David Suzuki Foundation, U of S, Ducks Unlimited. So we had a broad range of interest groups that were actually on site and helping us. So basically, at the end of the day, I guess to say is, how do we preserve the environment, our region, our area? We use the fur block, I guess, as the area, the boundaries that we took, and those were set up and afforded by the provincial government. So we use that as the boundary. And basically now going forward is, how do we preserve and manage it going forward in order for us to protect the environment and have a balance of the economy? And how do we preserve back into what basically made us as a community? We're going to be 250 years old here in a couple of years. And we were part of the first industry in Western Canada, which was the fur trade. Now fish and fur today, if you look at it, as you know, there's no economic in regards to fish and fur. But can we revive that? Can we revive it? I know commercial fishing is trying to be taken over by the outfitters. They want all the quotas. But that's part of our history. So going forward, I guess it's just, those are some of the things I think we have in terms of challenges that going forward. I know health is a big issue, and like I said before, we have lots of industry up north, and yet there seems to be that wall we call the NAD line that seems to separate the north and the south. So those are some of the opening comments I would make, Rick, in regards to how is it that, how is it that we're going to move this going forward? I mean, it's going to be a big challenge. I've heard some people saying, let's separate from Saskatchewan, but is it a reality? Because we're not being paid attention to. And so now the rivers gathering, what is the mandate of the rivers gathering? I think it'd be nice to fully understand it, because I know a while back we had this discussion, and I participated in some of it in regards to it's how all the rivers connect through the Churchill River system. That's why we're one of the oldest communities in Western Canada. So So I'll leave it at that for now, Rick, and then maybe carry on later. So, merci. Yeah.
Louis, thank you very much. Louis Gardner, President Lala Bay Métis Local in Alacrosse. And congratulations on the meeting that you had last week of bringing our citizens together between Alacrosse and Beauval. You and Joe Daya organized an information session on not only the SAS Power spraying that we're doing under the power lines, the issue of that, but also the duty to consult. Those issues are very much a big part of our land users and traditional way of life here in our community. So we also have Joe Foray has joined us from Manitoba. Joe is a resident of The Paw in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He has a very interesting story of his position and life experiences as well. So, Joe, if you don't mind stepping in and introducing yourself and saying hello to our people here.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. As Rick said, kind of a unique position that I find myself in. I've heard lots of talking about addiction. I've heard talk about mental health. I was kind of thrust into a campaign that I really didn't want to do. I don't know if anybody were aware, but in The Paw, Manitoba, last April, there was a really bad event with tainted drugs, sending a number of people to the hospital, and unfortunately, one young man died. That young man was my son. And the narrative around opiate addiction, opioid crisis that we find ourselves in really parlayed to addiction. My son wasn't an addict. My son didn't have any addiction issues. As a matter of fact, he survived addiction because, I'm in recovery. So his childhood was brought up with my addiction and his mother's addiction. And this here, at least here in Manitoba, they weren't talking about recreational drug use. Everything was parlayed to addiction and self harm reduction, but they weren't talking about recreational drug use. So I talked to my wife, who wasn't his mother, but and I said, somebody needs to start saying something. So we developed what's called a No Thanks, I'm Good campaign, and I will speak more to that probably in the next day or so. Warning our youth of the dangers of recreational drug use. I mean, as a recovering addict, I've had a successful life now. I'm an actor, I'm a filmmaker. We wanted to inform these kids that before I became an addict, I became a recreational drug user, and which recreational drugs I developed into an addict after continual use. But what was happening with the government, at least here in Manitoba, when they were releasing the numbers of this was how many deaths were occurring. So in 2022, we had 418 deaths. When my son died, I wanted to understand these numbers more because I didn't want him being another statistic because he wasn't an addict. And what I found out was that of those 418 deaths that Manitoba incurred last year, in 2022, 226 fentanyl was either a contributor or the primary. And of those 226, fentanyl was a contributor in 220 deaths, which means it was mixed with another drug, whether it was marijuana, whether it was cocaine. So it was really sending the wrong message to the recreational drug user that, hey, you know what? Hey, I'm okay. I don't do opioids. So we wanted to counter that with the No Thanks, I'm Good campaign. And we've also set up, I'm chairman of the Singing Red Bear Foundation, my son's traditional name. He's in the back there. That was his traditional name, Singing Red Bear. and through the Singing Red Bear Foundation that we hope to be a national resource for youth through the building and creating awareness initiatives, programs around the dangers of recreational drug use. Because in my mind, we can build all the resources and we can build everything up, but if our children aren't there to benefit from it, then it's for naught. My goal is that we can give our youth enough education about this, and then with the other supporting projects, give them that will to want to live a drug-free life. We're losing too many of our young people. And my son was only 31; he had his life ahead of him. So when we're talking about health, we're talking about what's going on in our communities. Through the No Thanks I'm Good campaign in northern Manitoba, I've spoken to about 6,000 youth. I've heard horrendous stories of what's happening in our communities as far as drug use. I have, so they want something, they want a better life. They want to make better choices, but they don't have the support within their communities to support saying, no, thanks, I'm good. They're inundated every day with this type of lifestyle. So it's really, my goal is that, the drug industry is $1 billion business. I can't do anything about the supply, but anybody that knows anything about economics, it works on a supply and demand. So I'm through the No Thanks I'm Good campaign, we're trying to attack the demand so that there is no demand in our communities. And then hopefully those drugs will leave, and then our children will have a fighting chance to profit from all these initiatives that we are trying to build for them. And so that's me in a nutshell. I'll talk about No Thanks I'm Good. Rick has given me the opportunity to present. We visit as many communities as we can, and we bring my son's story, because right now, this is not the 70s anymore. This is not the 60s where drugs and all that stuff. Fentanyl poisoning has changed everything. And that's another thing. I don't say my son died from an overdose. My son died from fentanyl poisoning, because whatever he was convinced to try was poisoned by fentanyl, and that's what killed him. It wasn't what he thought he was going to try with his friends that night. And I've heard from countless families who have lost children, loved ones, through the same way. Children as young as 10, trying marijuana, dying from fentanyl poisoning. So when we're talking about the health of our communities, I think that we really need to address the recreational aspect of drug use, not just addiction. I'll put contact up in the chat later if anybody wants to talk more about me. But again, thank you for allowing me to be part of this. It's still fresh. Next month will be a year. But I think this message that we're trying to give to our communities outweighs my pain, and that's why I continue to talk whenever I get the opportunity. So thank you for allowing me to sit in on this next couple of days. I grew up in the Pas, Manitoba. I have family from Sandy Bay, Saskatchewan. My roots are actually from Sandy Bay. I grew up on the land with my dad, hunting, trapping. I don't think I ate hamburger till I was 12. But I wanted to talk about that, when we talk about teachings. When we were in the bush, my dad would always say, don't go that way, or don't go this way. Or if we were walking on ice, the ice would be uplifted a little bit rippled. Don't go over there, the ice is thin. So we had our traditional ways of teaching our youth the dangers of what the bush was like, and how to stay safe in the bush. I think now, as the world has transformed, we need to redirect that now and start teaching our children how to be safe in the world and the places where not to go and how to keep themselves safe. And that's what we're trying to do through the No Thanks I'm Good campaign and through the Singing Red Bear Foundation. So anybody wants more information, feel free to contact me. But thanks again, Rick.
Thanks, Joseph. And once again, our condolence. The inspiration for this very worthy message for our children. As Jerry opened up in the prayer, it's our children that we're looking at, the generations to come, what we're preparing for them. And you're right, preparing our children, we have to teach them. And that's one of the debates that we're having is, should the school system involve this type of life skills? I think these are the pitfalls of, the meth experimentation, the quick addiction that it has, the drug dealer's business plan of fronting these drugs to these kids, getting them hooked, and then, we know about these attempts, but are we teaching the young ones, or should we not be teaching the young ones? That's a big debate here. So thank you for bringing this message forward in the way you have, in a very respectful way, but very meaningful, and hats off to you, Joe. Jerry, ansik
Ah,
mamtani tsiganuma tayo tapahtin ka pihta minuma.
yeah, stop on one my nista. Mam tani magawa na awas sa ko. Ego, I pick square up when we look for answers in different ways. Yeah, where it takes me is back to the land. I'm sure other people have different ways of trying to find these answers in order to help our young ones from, really touching story from Joseph there. Joseph, condolences from this side. But I spent a lot of my youth, I've wasted a lot of my youth in alcohol at the time. I'd go trapping and then I'd spend my money on alcohol. And but I always knew for me, the answer was back on the land. I've never was disconnected, even though I was in a residential school. I was disconnected there for a while, but I always wanted to go back into the land. I spent probably 20, 25 years on the trap line, a lot of times by myself, along the Churchill River, just east of here. I still got a camp there and we go there whenever we can. Of course, a lot of the forests have grown, have burnt up to extremely, the forest fires have been really extreme this past few years, and they burnt up one of my camps and my boats, everything up there. My traps are all gone. And this is where I spent a lot of time, in the forest. And I came to learn things. I didn't go to very much schooling, but I come to learn things from the land. I learned that the old folks used to call points of interest, places that were important to them. They used to give them names. They used to have names. Different things. Where we were, we have where I have my cabin now is in Moose Nose Mountain, we called it in Cree, Squanawatchee. And the Deos were also a big trapping family in late Albert Dale. They used to be when the sun up, and they used to be just to the southeast of where I was. But going back to the history of names, when the old people we used to name a place, a lake, or whatever, it gave them spirit. It gave the lake spirit, and it gave the lake strength. Therefore, the lake had power. That's what I learned. And somewhere along the line, even that was taken away from us. The names, with the original names that we had given them, the people of the land had given places there's names that are foreign and they don't have no spiritual content or whatever, you know. So that disconnect is from my point of view anyway, the disconnect from the land is made an impact on us and our children. You know, we got to somehow reconnect them to the Mother Earth. You know, that's about all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Very that living off the land, our generation we're privileged, I guess, to be raised in that way, coming into supplies for our into our communities. But one thing I always saw when I was living off the land with our parents was most of them they didn't drink out on the land. All that partying or alcoholing happened in town. And I think that's, keeping both feet on that kind of life, I guess, if we can teach our children to find a way to. I have nephews here in Beauval that never been on the Beaver River until after high school, like when they were adults by the time they were introduced on a boat on a Beaver River. So let's not, we do have to take all those children, beyond our immediate families, to experience that. As Jerry said, sometimes those answers are on the land. Just being on the land, you'll find those answers or the feelings or the confidence to do what you're doing. The anxiety of the community kind of cleanses your mind when you're out on the land. So as part of this preparing our kids for our future, there's a White Lightning connection here. I'm assuming it's Marie. If you're ready to join us, but any thoughts that you may have on the experiences you have in counseling kids or preparing them on their life's journey through trauma. But Marie Mihalitz, if that's you on the White Lightning line, feel free to join us. Norman Opikoku has give us a message. He couldn't unmute his microphone, so as soon as he figures that out, he'll share a few words. But he is listening to us. Any other comments from anybody at this time? Candace? Oh, White Lightning. Okay, just before, go for it, White Lightning. You got your hands up. There it is, Marie. There, unmuted.
Hey, hello.
Oh, wow.
Hey, I'm so excited to be a participant in this river gathering. My name is Marie Mihalitz, and I grew up in Beauval at the mission. I've been part of the community my whole life, and the work that I've specialized in working with youth, and particularly in the area of grief and trauma work. I started out in education, but found that, this was in the 90s. Back in the 90s, it was a lot of the kids were falling through the cracks with addiction and mental health issues. And as a classroom teacher, I became frustrated because there's only so much I could do in the classroom. But having grown up here and lived with the parents of the children I was teaching in the classroom, I took advantage of the relationships that way, because we know each other. Our kids are related, our communities are related. So I think just the net of, I'll try and summarize this. I know there's so much to say. And adding on to what Joseph has to say, I know, Joseph, I'll for sure be in touch with yourself. And I'm really sorry to hear about your son. And it's the work that we try and do for prevention and intervention and postvention. A lot of the works that our frontline people, including myself, I worked with Northern Lights with the school division as a consultant, and really thankful for the opportunity that I had there to learn the intervention models. But what we're finding, a good example is like with the assist model for suicide prevention. It's based on a model that you're standing by the river and you're pulling people out, and as a lifeguard. But after a while, it's like, you know, we're trained to teach professionals, but the kids would come up to me and say, well, why can't we learn? Because we don't phone the professionals at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, when there's a crisis with our peers. So that kind of rang a bell, and it starts us thinking. It's like, why are we jumping in the river in the first place? You know, let's go upstream a little bit and see what the issues are for why we're even getting to that place. And we have a team in Beauval, White Lightning Consulting is kind of partnered in with Green Arrow, and I see Candace there and Linda. You know, a lot of us have the same backgrounds with education and health and justice. It's kind of this intersectoral approach that we've learned to try and offer something that's outside of these boxes that we've been so indoctrinated in, you know. And I've learned now, you know, I remember as a kid thinking we'll be okay up here. They'll never come here. You'd hear about the Amazon being cut, you know, but we'll be okay up here. And now it's like I have a cabin across La Plonge here at Brush Creek, and the forest plans that we've seen coming down the pipe here, and it's already there. Like you can hear them cutting already in the back. Really is it's kind of a fear that's been building, and we see it in the work that we do with our retreats and our groups for with youth and elders. The ecological grief that's causing. Like an elder had come into one of our retreats and told us, you know, it makes me sick to my stomach to see the logging trucks coming by. To know that the medicines are going to be disappearing, and what can we do about that? And with the young people as well, they have a lot of hope. There's a lot of resilient young people out there that really want to preserve their language. The interest and the curiosity is there, and the concern. But I think we just have to stop trusting that the government is going to help us someday. You know, when the systems that tore all of this apart, we can't expect those same systems to build them back up again. So it's like we have to help put that back, to put all of this back together. And I'm really excited and happy to be listening in and participating in this forum, and listening to Jerry, Lacrosse, and Louis, and Linda, and all of you, with the wisdom that you have, the experiences that you've lived. And it gives me hope, because it just feels like even since COVID, you know, that we've been so isolated, that it's time for us to join forces again and come up with a plan that's going to work for us in our region. I know since Keewatin was dissolved and the province has taken over the Saskatchewan Health Authority, our mental health has gone down the tubes as far as services, especially for young people, because this is where I work now full time. And most of the frontline workers are geared towards adults. And the youth are just kind of left like hot potatoes. The education system says, well, we can only do so much, just refer them to mental health. And I worked in the mental health field, and it's like, well, we're more set up here to deal with the adults. So there's kind of a limbo area there. And what we find is we go out to Sandy Beach. For the last 15 years, we've been offering on the land retreats out there that really help connect children, youth, elders, families back to ceremony. And really, it's the ceremonies are the prescriptions. It's just that people have forgotten what they are, because that's what this was about. The residential schools for the last 6-7 generations here have wiped all of those memories away. And thank goodness for people that have restored those ceremonies, where, and not only that, it's living off the land. What foods do we eat? What medicines do we have? We have tons and tons of youth that do not want to be part of the system. They don't want to go out to university or college or post-secondary. They want to be out on the land. My own son-in-law has been going to BC and northern Manitoba this spring. He wants to be a guide. But who comes to your high school when you're going to graduate and says, who wants to learn how to be a guide? A lot of our young people are connected. They want to go out with their drones and say, what the hell are they doing out there across at Brush Creek and Tippo Lake now? The caribou are out there. They've gone out on their skidoos just a couple weeks ago to go and check, and they said there's tracks like cattle out there, and why are they still cutting? Our young people these are kids in their late 20s that are coming back and asking, like, what are people doing about this? So I'm really happy to hear that Kola and Isla Cross have got together, because we've said before, it would be nice if our fur blocks at least could to stand together and somehow come up with ranger programs for that. It's all so interconnected. I work with mental health front lines, but at the same time, we can't separate and dissect that mental health is not a part of our physical and spiritual health. And really, the work that I've learned is that our illnesses have spirits, and we need to be able to go there and stop, breathe, have the safe and the sacred space to shut off all of that static that's out there on our phones. And the world is a crazy place. It's crazy enough. We need to be able to have time to sit down and talk to each other, put our phones away, and actually have conversations like this, where we can discover the solutions together and not have to keep that dependency and saying, well, the government needs to do this, and blame other people for our problems. Because I know that we have the solutions here. We have the leadership, and it's opportunities like this, Rick, that you've created for us that will help us to come up with some kind of a plan. I'm hoping that we can do that together. So it gives me hope, and I look forward to the next few days, and hopefully be able to contribute a little bit more. And I think that's all I'll say for now. So thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And congratulations on attaining your doctor's degree. Woohoo. It's a celebration of higher achievement in education, but also a role model, and the humbling of coming to our community to help. That's there's no greater gesture of love than you can see there. Candace, we'll open it up to you. Let's see, share a few words.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Candace Paul, and I'm a member of English River First Nation. I married into the band, 39 years ago. and been here for like 2/3 of my life. So I feel like I'm a northerner for sure. What I've learned over the last many decades here is that, that land-based healing does work. My husband and I, he was a residential school student. And when we made the choice to come live up here on his reserve, that's when his healing journey started, healing from the trauma of residential school. And we took that same and transferred that whole concept of decolonization, healing from that trauma, and created an education program called Reclaiming Our Youth Homefront School, which we operated for 12 years. And every day, children were taken out on the land. And every day, we let the land teach them. And it wasn't that we were teaching them this piece and this piece and this piece from the land, but the land was teaching them everything, teaching them physics, right? How to ride an ice floe down the creek, teaching them how to check and see if the ice was safe, all of those things that others were speaking about. And but in the last few years, my role here in the community has changed to emergency management. And what Marie was talking about, what Louis was talking about, what others were talking about, that ecological grief is real. And it is making us sick. We see that, we feel that mental health piece is just the spirit suffering. The very young children. We took our grandson, who was 5.5 at the time, down the highway last year. And we saw the clear cuts for the first time. And we stopped and pulled over. And he picked up a piece of branch that was all that was left laying on the approach to the clear cut. And he was so angry, he just threw it. He said, look what that's all they left of my trees. That's all they left. So, he was very upset. And all he wanted to do was go home and hug his trees because he's been raised in the forest. So that was powerful. If a 4 or 5-year-old can feel that, our youth are feeling that. I remember being a youth, and at the time, way back in the 60s and 70s, it was about pollution and war and those kinds of things, and those things impacted. That affected me. So what's going on now with all of the things for our youth is really powerful. With the drugs, with the ecological, fear. What's my future going to be? So in the last few years, I've been taking part in the Northwest Communities Incident Command in my role with English River. And a lot of things have come across in terms of health services. And the health services that we are lacking. And that we have to suffer for. Like Louis mentioned, the cancer rates are off the charts. Like diabetes rates are going higher. And all of these things. And we can't have a baby, or we can't even really get palliative care very well in our own communities close. We can't even get long-term care in our own communities close, with the language speakers, with the families being able to participate. And there seems to be an unbelievable amount of barriers. Some of those barriers are funding, A lot of it is that the government just straight up does not care. In fact, I'd have to say that they enjoy the benefits of us being in crisis. Because as long as we're in crisis, we're unable to negotiate. We're unable to stand up to the pressures that they are putting on the lands that they're destroying, that they're messing up, that we depend on. You know, in this time, and we saw it very clearly during the pandemic, when they locked us in, when the main grocery store in the whole region was down because of COVID, and they did not do a single thing to help us get food into the region. Nothing. Each community had to do that. Each First Nation had to do that. We had to send hunters out. Isle Cross sent fishermen out. They didn't care. And what I think of the words of the late Harold Johnson. Why are we going south? Why are we going there? Because they don't want us there. Why would we want to impose ourselves there to get the services we need here? We need a hospital here where people can have babies. Or we need midwives. We need a birthing center. We need palliative care. We need cancer treatment in our communities. If we need dialysis in our communities, we need all of these things. We need the mental health and addiction services without the barriers to access. Everyone knows an addict will say yes when they're coming down that they need help. But if you've got to wait 3 weeks or a month, or you have to phone every day at 11 o'clock and you don't have a phone, or you're still coming down from your high, you're not going to get there. You're never going to get that help. We've got youth couch surfing, wandering around our communities all night because they've got no place to sleep or to be. And because people don't feel safe with them in their homes because they are whacked out on these drugs. So, you know, we've got breakings and enterings galore. The criminals are having a heyday. You know, so they're creating this crisis in our communities. Our elders in our communities are fearful all the time, even with their doors locked. Because we've had drive-by shootings in our communities. And then we hear what's going on, you know, where things are even worse, and we're afraid it's coming our way. And this colonization came from corporatization, came from the destruction of the lands. So we have to do something. And I'm hoping to hear many people step up and give their ideas, be constructive, and be courageous to make things happen. That's about all I can say today.
Thank you, Candace. These discussions are always lead us to the land, Jerry. Tanemyo, Sydney. Your prayers said it bang on. We got to have some stability in our communities. The young people are need that opportunity to, I guess, to heal, but also be supported in the homes and being, you know, their safety as well. So if there's any, even if there's addicts out there that are listening, or if there's any ideas, some of us, we don't experience the trauma that you have, the pains that you go through. You know, feel free to contact us either through Facebook or on Zoom. We could hook you up here. Jerry, just a thought as we carry on here.
I'd like to I'd like to tell you a story when I grew up, my generation. We didn't live in town like Louis mentioned earlier. We lived out in the land away from town. And a few months back, I thought about it, and it really hit me hard. You know, how we grew up with fear as a Métis person, as Métis people. You know, of course, we never had any kind of refrigeration to store food, and we had to preserve it by smoking or whatever. Whatever we killed, we were afraid. We were afraid to feed our children. My parents were afraid to feed their children because if they were caught, they would be prosecuted by the government officials. And you know, when they made a smokehouse, it had to be away from where we lived because they had to have time to put the fire out so the boat passing by won't see the smoke, because they were afraid it was conservation officers. And to go hunting a duck for dinner, our mom would take send us out. To kill a duck was illegal. This is the food for my siblings and my family. Like, we felt like we were stealing. All the time there was that fear of getting caught and prosecuted. And, of course, as a child, you're afraid to go to jail. You're afraid of cops or any kind of uniform. And that fear manifested into what we see today. I think, the dysfunction we see in our communities, drug addiction and all this stuff, that it was a real thing. That fear was a real thing. And I've never heard anybody talk about it. Of course, as I grew older, it was a challenge to go shoot a moose, because, at times I felt that I was in Sherwood Forest, with Robin Hood. But anyway, this was a similar thing. And I just wanted to bring that out. It hit me hard when I realized the way we grew up in the bush. And it wasn't just myself; it's most of the people, the Métis people in Isle Cross and the surrounding area. We grew up with that fear of making a living and living off the land, as we say.
No, that's very real what you're telling us, Jerry, and sharing. Nistanan piagon smagan sak we always call them the keepers, but they weren't keeping the land. It's it's keeping a colonial policy. I think that's what we're seeing with this authority of the Crown's role here. And with the treaties that were made, in the prayers that you said, it's caring and sharing. And that was the foundation of the treaties. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from Chief Wayne Samaganus, and he speaks wisely of the treaty obligations. And the other chief that I've spoke to, and he may join us yet this week, is Chief Willie Littlechild. Chief represents us at the United Nations level. So UNDRIP, when people know about United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People, he was right there in negotiating this, and he knows that we're doing this river gathering. And as Louis asked, what's the purpose of the river gathering? What's the agenda? The river boundaries are our treaty boundaries. Treaty boundaries weren't surveyed. They didn't send the surveyors from Britain to come and survey the pieces of land they were negotiating. They were negotiating by water basins. Treaty 6 is a Saskatchewan River water basin. Treaty 10 is the Churchill River water basin. Treaty 8 is the Mackenzie River. and Treaty 5 is going into the Lake Winnipeg. So if you watch the water basins and we say it's a river gathering, and the source of life is water. I remember growing up as a kid when we used to swim in the Beaver River. But all of a sudden, all the parents simultaneously stopped all the kids from swimming in the Beaver River. And now we had to go swim at the La Planche Creek across Agam Sihuti, across La Planche, where the La Planche River feeds into the Beaver River. That's where we'd go swim. That was our swimming hole. But they wouldn't let us go on the Beaver River because of what the farmers were doing to the water, because of the pesticides and the herbicides that were put in by farmers upstream, Cold Lake, Meadow Lake, Big River. And I guess that's what Joe Fourier is saying as well. These dangers that our grandparents and parents warned us about, the new dangers that we have are these poisons coming into our communities as well, with fentanyl and the meth addictions. We have to be as vigilant. We now have to give those dangers on our list of life skills for our children to carry into the future. It's not only knowing ice thickness or fire safety, it's a whole new set of life skills. But the other message that I got from our good friend, Nap Gardner, your brother, Jerry, he said, don't forget about what climate change is causing us. Climate change is affecting us not only in the water supply. You see the drying of the Bow River that's happening in Calgary. I saw pictures of Prince George just yesterday. The Fraser River is just bone dry, and the water under the bridges. There's nothing in Prince George. And to see the Beaver River and La Planche and Durocher Lake in my area here, the water level is really low. So climate change is a big impact, but also population will move. If it's too hot in California, if it's too hot in Calgary or Lethbridge, people will migrate. And our piece of paradise in northern Saskatchewan is a prime location for people to relocate. And we heard that with the Northern Corridor as well. The Northern Corridor is being contemplated of building a huge utility corridor from Fort McMurray to Labrador, putting highways, railroads, airports, pipelines, and all the different, I guess, power sources and extracting resources to world markets. So these are going to be major impacts in our backyard, in our boreal forest. But be cognizant of these impacts. They're going to be be affecting us in the future, affecting our children. So a lot to think about. I don't see any hands up right now. If Norman Opichokio said he's listening in and will be joining us on Thursday, and hopefully his audio will work by then. He can share us some words, but he very much appreciates the dialogue we're having right now. And Chris LaFontaine, maybe it's an opportunity for you to share a few words. Chris, Tansigya Ogati, and Chris is coming in from Regina, way down in Pasko Sagahegani. Right there. Pasko. I'm lost in in geography there, Chris.
You're really lost because I'm actually sitting in Hawaii because I'm down visiting my grandchildren. So my grandchildren living on the Big Island, and one of the things as I've listened, I've actually talked with a lot of the Hawaiians. They're going through the same experience, and as they start thinking some of the issues that you actually have, that we're actually dealing with and everything like this, it's Indigenous people across the world. And you've talked, Rick, about the importance of the Arctic group and the opportunity of actually sharing and participating. And what's good about what we're doing here is the opportunity of actually taping the actual information so that it'll be kept and be able to be rebroadcast. You'll see it on YouTube. You'll be able to point people there and say, this is what the people actually said. And the key part of all of this, as I think Candace said, is that people just need to know that they're not alone. They need to know that as they begin to think about what they're experiencing, the other people are experiencing. And I heard Joseph's story. Just like to share with you, Joseph, first of all, my family's condolences, but I want people that are listening to understand that this, what your experience, Joseph, is happening all over Canada, all over the world. There are these types of things that are coming into place as we almost normalize them. Then there's the opportunity of actually realizing that what we're experiencing is not normal. There's somebody that's benefiting from it. And so hopefully as we go through these next 4 days, you'll hear the experiences and perspectives from a number of different people, and you'll begin to see that we're not alone. And the only way that we're going to do it, and I'm not sure who actually said it, but if you're waiting for somebody else to come in and solve your problem, it's not going to happen. I mean, people will come in and they'll say, oh yeah, you pay me and I'll do all this great work for you. But all the experiences that you have with mental health, treatment centers, all those types of things, they're not having the impact that we could have if we just organize ourselves and do the things that we're doing. So thank you, Rick, for the opportunity. Thank you for those that are participating, and it's very enlightening to me as I begin to listen to each of the stories that people have, because everybody has their story. It's because of the opportunity of sharing that story that'll help others. So thank you, Rick. And I just noticed my light is not on, so you can't recognize me. I'll have to turn on the light. Just hang on a second.
I can't believe he's calling us from Hawaii. Like, we've had somebody from Labrador. I thought I was far out, but Hawaii?
I'll be back in Regina on Thursday. So so it's the way it was, but I've got a daughter over here and 4 grandchildren, and they keep my grandson keeps telling me that he's came to my island in Regina, and now he wants me to come to his island. And so that's why we're down here, is to visit his island. So, but thank you very much for the opportunity, Rick.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks to Chris's contact. Tomorrow we're going to have a past president of the Canadian Medical Association. He's the first Indigenous doctor listed in the Medical Post's 50 Most Powerful Doctors. His name is Alika LaFontaine. He'll be joining us tomorrow afternoon on our sessions, and he's Métis, Oji-Cree, Pacific Islander ancestry. So, Chris, thanks for securing such a great mind and a great young inspiration for young people to go into the medical field. But I look forward to hearing from Alika. Doreen Dawkin has joined us. Doreen, are you ready to share a few words? Is that fine with you? Is Doreen is very
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, very dedicated worker in sheltering our people here in the Beaver River housing region, but also her life experience is very traumatic, and the work and the hope that she brings. Doreen, if you don't mind, step right in. Tawao.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to listen to everybody's stories. My heart goes out to Joseph. I can't say I know how you feel, but I grieve in the same way as you. I lost my son in December, and I guess that's probably my life story. My son was schizophrenic, paranoid schizophrenic, and our North provided no services for my son. So I had to move him to Regina to get the help that he needed. And just due to the deterioration of our health system, even those services weren't provided there. And because of his vulnerability and his addictions to drugs, he was actually murdered at the end of December. So it's a sad story, but it also has created my life's work. And so I work with Marie with White Lightning and Green Arrow. And so for 20 years, we've been working on a better approach to mental health for our region. And we've been in a lot of discussions. We've met with a lot of political leaders. We've done a lot of grant applications. But just listening to everybody, I have to say that I agree. We know that going back to our land works. But you know, my mother, Narma Jean Bird, was a resident elder in Regina for over 30 years, and her whole call to action was about getting back to the medicine wheel approach and understanding that trauma and healing has to happen with that spiritual connection, that we have to be well in every sector, but at the core of that sector comes our spiritual values. And I think that our young people need to get back to that. So I think that needs to be a really integral part of our education system. But the things that I've learned over these last 20 years in all of these discussions, and it's kind of sad, is that within our region, we have personal resources, key people within each community that are experts in their field. And yet we seem to go outside of our region to bring people in. And we don't need to do that. So I'd like to see us as a river people start to highlight those key people within our region that are experts in their field and use them. And come together as a group to make it better. Working together as a region in each of these areas. I'm hoping at the end of this river gathering that we have developed some regional committees for education, mental health, addictions, housing, communication, and then just admin, the grants and the funding, so that in a communal effort, we use these committees to make our region stronger and self-sufficient, and to use the resources within our region. I think it's so sad, like Candace said, that we go south to get what we need. How sad is that? When we are rich in resources that everybody is depleting, and that funding isn't coming back to our region at the rate that it should. Yes, we have some, but not at the rate that it should. So I'm really excited that there's going to be a number of speakers and that we're sharing our ideas. I just have to tell you that my ability to deal with my grief comes from going to the cabin and getting back out to the land, being with my trees and medicines and rolling in the snow with the dogs and just and our youth need that. Our youth, I'm in homes every single day of every week. And there's just so much agony and grief. If I just put a little plug in for those with the mental health issues, that's a growing number due to the kind of as a result of the meth use in our area. There's so much added schizophrenic symptoms coming with these people. And a lot of people think that because I've been at this for 25 years, that I have some answers. And so a lot of families from within my region where I have houses have reached out to me and say, what do we do? And I have no answers for them because at a provincial level, even a national level, there's very few resources and it's not being addressed. We have a facility in North Battleford, big, beautiful, billion-dollar facility built, but they can only operate at 40% capacity because they don't have staff. So I was crying out to my son's doctors in September about trying to get him back into the facility because when he came out, he did so well. And my heart really ached for that doctor. He told me he is a psychologist in Regina. 30 years he's been doing that. And he said that, from about 2010 to right up until 2022 or so, he had worked with mostly schizophrenics or bipolar patients, but that 90% of his patients were homeless and lived on the streets in Regina. And that every year he could count on losing probably 3, 4, 5 of them a year. And he said, this year, I've lost 34. It's only 7 months. And that's the direction we're going. So I thought, the strain on those workers and the doctors, because they're, my son had a community resource team, and those frontline workers were amazing, but they could only do so much. We need the facilities, and I think we need the facilities at a regional level to meet the needs. And we need to be able to use the resource teams within our own region. We need to come together and to build what isn't there. So, yeah, so that's about it, Rick. Rick is my brother, and Rick, I have to.
Oh. I think you muted yourself. Sorry, Doreen. I think you made it. Yeah, Doreen, wrong button, the other button.
There.
There you
Am
go.
I there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have to give a shout out to Rick. Rick was worked. I manage housing for Beaver River, so I've got 6 communities in northern Saskatchewan, and Rick was my maintenance supervisor. Rick is the reason that we actually have a approach to dealing with meth within the home to make them healthier. And so it was because of Rick reaching out and gathering all the research for our region that we actually might only be the only entity in all of Canada that has an approach, a policy and protocols in place to deal with the meth residue in homes. So good job, Rick.
Yes, that's it was a learning experience for all of us, I guess, Doreen,
Yeah.
when we found out that when people use meth in a space, could be a bathroom, could be a basement, could be a bedroom, anywhere, a shed, that meth smoke recrystallizes on the surface. And when children or anybody else touches it with their hands, it goes back into their system. It goes right through the skin. So it's you can't just use paint. It percolates through regular paint. You got to use a very special bins product that encapsulates the meth behind paint. So on how you clean it and how you deal with meth residue from homes. Thanks to Beaver River and also the leadership with Doreen, we made it a provincial policy, and hopefully saved a few children from I guess unaware, unaware dangers that are in our homes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doreen. We're here for we call this a snowball effect. We went 4 days with this one, 4 consecutive days, because some people, they work up in the mine. Some people are on job sites. Some people are traveling. So we wanted to catch like a snowball. We'll start today and we'll end on Thursday. But all this is captured on YouTube. And anybody that wants to review this or use it for their purpose, you'll find it on YouTube on CIPI Radio. But we definitely, hearing your words, Doreen, is heartwarming with the commitment that you're making towards making our communities a better place. Joe Fourier has raised his hand, so well, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again. Just listening to Doreen, I was a program support worker in addictions for 3 or 4 years. And in regards to the meth and the psychosis that meth leaves the users even after they stop. And it was always been, a thought, and we've discussed this many times at the foundation that I worked is like, we treat them, we get them off meth, we get them somewhat stable, but we don't know how to deal with the psychosis. And there was no follow-up with psychosis. And some of us were talking about, how meth just, destroys the brain so badly, rewires everything, and it's, you sometimes can't get it right back. You can't get it back. And what we're seeing, she mentioned that, the psychiatrists, the psychologists that worked with the meth, they end up homeless. And then they end up reusing again. And a lot of them die because they're buying meth that's laced, tainted. So we thought about, well, what can we do? What kind of secondary housing can we give that particular population, in recovery as secondary to keep them safe? And we threw ideas like maybe a farm, because when the brain is damaged to that level, it's beyond a mental illness now, and they're incapable of caring for themselves. If it was a regular psychological disorder, we would put them in a home, we would put them in a place, and we would care for them, and we would look after them so they don't harm themselves. But for some reason, there's this stigmatization attached when it's a drug issue, that we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to create that space for them so that they can't hurt themselves anymore. And they get pushed off to the side because it's a drug-induced psychosis. It's not a regular brain injury or mental illness that, like say autism or stuff like that. I think that needs to change. I think that ideology of when people, especially with meth, because meth is probably one of the most dangerous drugs when it comes to harming the brain. And there's no other drug like it. And I speak from experience. I've always counted my blessings, for the 40 years that I spent in addiction, that I walked out as a survivor, and, Creator blessed me, with the ability to continue thinking, continue working, and now speaking on behalf and being this advocate that I really didn't choose. It was chosen for me, so I go with it. But I think we really need to start looking at in our communities where people are recovered from using meth, but still suffer from the effects of that addiction. And having those homes within our communities, we're not sending them away, but having those homes within that community where they're cared for, and that's key, cared for, not looked after, but cared for. And so that they don't fall back into that addiction, so that they can find some way. Like my son has autism. We finally got him living on his own. He's 29 and maybe gonna get his first job. So we've been easing him into a regular job. And I think for people that are coming off meth, especially meth, that there needs to be that recovery process because they don't fully recover. The brain doesn't rewire itself after the withdrawals and the healing. Like with the heroin, you go through the withdrawals, you can stay off it long enough. But for some reason with meth, it just changes the composition of the brain, and we need to care for them after they stop using. And I commend Doreen, for the work that she's doing, but I think changing that stigma, not being afraid to talk about this anymore, not being afraid to say, oh, my son's an addict, I don't know what to do, but trying to find that empathy, to have that caring attitude so that we show our community that, and take control of that. I just wanted to add that, and thank you, Doreen, so much for sharing that story with us and with the work that you're doing. It's much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. No, these are perspectives and stories that you guys are sharing that we would never single-handedly, one person, carry this life struggle. But bringing your minds together, your stories together, I think it empowers people to, we have grandchildren and children that are coming, and the dangers we never imagined would be here. We thought about thin ice in the spring, and in the fall would be our danger in our immediate community, but it could be just peer pressure now. These are young kids. These are young, innocent kids that we have to. Man, we're all in this together. As Chris said from Hawaii, a lot of our indigenous populations are experiencing this in our communities. It's not immune from, we always thought it was the big cities that would have these problems, but it's the small villages and just your camps. You could be even the experience we had with Montreal Lake. Montreal Lake was evacuated from a fire and went south. All these young families moved to the city because of the fire threat, but they came home with addictions. They picked up some of these bad habits, and these drug dealers will prey on those people, and not only drug, but I guess human trafficking is some of the experiences we're having as well in some of our communities. We hear echoes of it, we hear rumors of it, but I think that's very much a big concern of missing women and missing children. It's an organized structure out there. Some of these organized criminal activities are based not in our communities. It could be based anywhere in Canada or in the world. But that fentanyl supply, as you said, Joe, we may not be able to control that, but if we can arm our kids with the ability to say no, and we could stop the demand side of that economic cycle. So this is a good discussion. This is very much what we anticipated. We wanted to hear from everybody, from all corners of our lives and all corners of the bush. But as we said, we'll continue in the next 3 more days. Different people will join us because of their schedulings. We want to, hear comments on the Facebook as well. If you're listening on Facebook, or an opportunity, if you make any comments, do make comments to the CIPI Radio Facebook, and they'll direct their comments to us. If we don't get him today, we'll certainly respond to them tomorrow. So this is an ongoing dialogue that we want to have. I have a phone here that says Rivers iPhone. I'm not sure who logged on under the Rivers iPhone, but if you want to share a story, the Rivers iPhone, just unmute yourself and introduce yourself. So I'm not sure, somebody's joined us here from a Rivers iPhone connection, but feel free to continue the dialogue. Jerry had to log off. He was on his cell phone, and I guess the battery died. So some of these are the technical hiccups we may have along the way here. But as we also want to acknowledge Harold Johnson, the late Harold Johnson had joined us through the pandemic community response that we had here for days and months. And Harold is a spirit of, I guess, reconciliation for him. Being a lawyer, he saw things in a different way, but he also saw addictions in a real way. So those of you that may not know Harold out there, he's written a few books on living in the North, also sharing stories about the treaties, Treaty 10 and Treaty 6 in the La Ronge, Molinosa area. But we're thinking of Harold today because this is what he liked. This is what he thought true living was, hearing each other as community people and supporting each other and finding a way to help each other. The other story I wanted to share with you at this time was my wife's auntie, Mary Ann Morin from Sandy Bay. He was asked, or she was asked through when the DNS, back in DNS days, they were asking community people what the priorities were. And the three priorities that the group of elders brought up was housing, the housing supply, to have a good place for housing, and employment. And those were top priority. People wanted to lobby. But in Mary Ann's eyes, she said, treatment for addictions was number one. If you don't treat the addicted person, that housing will be lost. The job will be lost. All that would have been for nothing if you don't deal with the root of the issue of dealing with people's addictions. And I think today that's what we're saying. We're not able to take care of our addictions properly in caring. We have ideas and solutions in our own communities with White Lightning and Green Arrow as an example, and Pine House and their efforts to deal with the alcohol and drug addictions as well. La Loche has a treatment center. La Ronge has developed a modern one, but each community has to have that ability. We can't depend on others. And I think as small as Sandy Bay, as small as Jans Bay, Cold Bay, Bear Creek, the smallest communities cannot be left out of having the ability to care for their people. So some of these are regional solutions, but in the region, we have to dance around the jurisdictions between on-reserve and off-reserve jurisdictions, the federal and provincial jurisdictions. So we're learning from each other in this way, but also where we're located is important. And I look at, as Northerners, we're a circumpolar world. So looking to the north may be sometimes a solution as well, and not necessarily to the south. So one of the, I guess, advocacies that I've been doing recently is to let people know that Northern Saskatchewan qualifies for the Arctic Winter Games. Sport and culture are very critical in developing young people and also expanding their horizons through sport and knowledge of their culture and celebrating their culture with other people. But the Arctic Games are a circumpolar games, north of 55. So northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, northern Alberta, northern BC, all qualify, northern Ontario, northern Quebec. So presently Alberta sends a team, and so does Quebec. but Saskatchewan and Alberta don't yet. So maybe with campaigning amongst our communities, the next games will be in 2026 in Whitehorse. We have 2 years to prepare. And speaking to the Arctic International Committee, they had kicked out Russia because of its activities in the Ukraine. So the Arctic Council does not allow a Russian delegation at the games anymore. So here's an opportunity for Northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba to send our youth to go showcase along with the Inuit Dene, maybe the Cree and Métis games as well. So I just wanted to give a hats off to that for those of you that are a new part of this pandemic, that after the pandemic, there'd be mental health issues and addictions issues. But if we can guide them to a cleaner way of life and kill that idle time, maybe they can set goals towards athletics or cultural activities. So think about the Arctic Games as an opportunity to collectively represent ourselves to the international forums that we have. Okay, a lot of Joe, you still have your hand up, or was that just a carryover from the last one? Yeah, okay. The Rivers iPhone, just to call out again, if we don't want to miss an opportunity, if somebody log on wants to share a story. But the Rivers iPhone, I'm not sure if that's
Debbie Mahalik, and she would like to speak.
She would? Oh, Debbie, come on in. Wow. I'll ask to unmute Debbie.
She can't unmute. Try *69, Debbie.
*69 on the phone will unmute you. Oh, just about. No, not yet, Debbie. I guess the other heads up, as I mentioned before, Chief Willie Littlechild had sent a message. We had sent him an invite. And he's at an international conference on justice. But they're talking about traditional knowledge of ascertaining jurisdiction over land, over community rights, and indigenous rights. But languages are very much a big part of that. And that's what I've heard here as well, that the youth are hungry for a language. The gift of language is is incredible. I was fortunate to grow up with the Cree language, but in some cases, looking at my grandchildren, the yearning for that language is so there. So it's whatever we can do to develop the language as well in our communities, I think is going to strengthen our children's path in the future. So as Marie said, and I agree with her, the yearning in some of these young people to get back on the land, to understand the land, but also to carry the gift of language gives us hope. Marie, is there any way to connect Debbie out there, or anything you want to add to what we've set up to now?
I know I'm just messaging her here and she's really frustrated. I don't know why it won't work, so I'll speak a little bit more, but I just like to talk a little bit about our we have the program that our team developed as part of my research and the grants that we had applied for, like Doreen was mentioning. We just keep saying to ourselves, there must be a reason why we're coming this close, but not quite. And it's events like this that you start to get those butterflies in your stomach again, because it's that hope, because sometimes it's like you're banging your head against the wall trying to fight these systems that it just feels like you're you're almost like Einstein. Everyone thinks you're crazy because you're kind of you're thinking outside of the box. But we put together a program, and it's really going back to reconnecting with spirit. And I know that can kind of be a cliche, but it's really aligning ourselves again with the natural law process. And the 13 moon calendar, lots of people say, well, what are you talking about? It's 12, like on the calendar, but actually, you know, it's 13. And then learning and teaching and having the themes around healing and wellness and our health, our holistic health, and just teaching every month. You know, that's the way it was. That's the way we followed the rhythm of life. You know, everything is so interconnected. And it just comes down to every day, what am I doing with my energy? You know, for people who are listening out there who are struggling and saying, you know, I'm tired of living like this. You know, how can I get help? Who can I reach out to? And going back to like Candace, Doreen, we're talking, there's so many experts in our communities. Even in this panel, you know, there's all of us sitting here saying we have the solutions here. We don't need to go south, but it's just a matter of organizing ourselves here. The NAD line, like I'll give you an example as a service provider, and we just met with a government official over the weekend, and I was explaining to him the frustration of as a service provider and counselor, therapist, providing mental health services up here. Indigenous Services Canada covers the treaty, and it's starting to cover the Métis, the First Nation and Métis clients. But if I try to get a group together, which I'm supposed to be covered as a therapist no matter where I work, if I lived in Prince Albert, Saskatoon, Regina, anywhere south of Green Lake, if I lived south of that, they would pay for a medical taxi for a client to jump on a medical taxi and go down there for 1 hour and then come back in a hotel room. And they'll do that for 20 hours. But we say, you know, the way that our process works is we work with groups because we sit in circles. That's where the medicine is. We sit in our circles and with our peers. And so we do pretty much group therapies and counseling. And in 4 days, we can get, how long it would take up here would be 4 years to make an appointment with a counselor for 1 hour a week, maybe a couple times a month. That's how the medical model works. That's what we're struggling with, is if you want to do that, that's how it needs to be served. But if I did that down south, if I offered a group up there, it would be paid for. And they're saying no. I said, we have a place here, we have a resort that we do our group work with, but it's no, they'll pay for them to go south, to take a taxi there and pay for their hotel rooms, but they won't pay for them to come anywhere up here north. Like if there was any other, like if it was Isle of Cross or Buffalo Narrows or Sandy Bay, or you know, how many of our communities have places that we could do this work? So it's the policies that we're trying to move, that you can't wait. You know, we're not waiting though. We're still doing the work. We've been doing it for decades now, but it's just that's some of the barriers that some people might be, you know, on their own starting to figure out. We're getting more and more therapists that are getting frustrated with that provincial system and saying, well, Waniska Therapy just across the alleyway here, Phyllis has started her own online counseling as well, and shout out to her because she's recognized that she can provide services as well online. And but for us, it's the group. the group dynamic is how we do our work, and teaching the kids about how to build a sweat lodge and not being fearful. I know what Jerry was talking about there, the fear factor, you know, it's a really interesting dynamic when you start talking about that core sense of self and my values and where do those come from. And it's like, well, being born and raised Catholic, you're taught that as soon as that baby comes out, like remember Isle of Cross, like in the hospital, they'd come right down to the delivery room and baptize you right there because you were born evil. Like get them straight to the church, and because you need to be saved that way. And then when you switch it around to the indigenous paradigm, it's you're born a sacred being because you're fresh out of the women or the portals, and we hold the medicine that helps to bring us through those portals into this reality. And we're born sacred and pure, and throughout our life we get dinged here and there, you know, with the traumas that happen to us. So it's a totally different flip of a worldview. And then you start getting these young people coming into our groups, and there's such a spiritual confusion there because Musham and Cookham are saying, no, get to church, Lisha Plan, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that. And they're saying, but what are we, like, how can I even think about that when they're digging out, like they're scanning up here, they're scanning the graves of children, you know. Our young people don't want to have anything to do with the religious affiliation. So even that, you know, we used to talk about generation gaps when we were teenagers. But it adds that extra twist where we really have to be careful not to be judging based on what religion we choose, and not to be pushing that on each other. And you can choose whatever you want. You don't, there's no right way. And that's just some of the flavors that we get in some of the work that we're doing is like Doreen was saying, a lot of this is a spiritual crisis that our young people are facing. And you know, we can, with suicide prevention being kind of the main reason that I got into the work that I do today. One of the first experiences I had was one of my best friends committed suicide back in 1992. And I remember talking to my peers, like, we're in our late 50s now, and we used to say, we never used to hear about suicide in Beauval. Like when we were kids, you never really heard, maybe a few people back then. So it's like we'll never really know the reasons why, but it's like there's just one is too many, you know. And we've got to start listening better as adults, as grandparents, as parents. A lot of the feedback we get from the kids is nobody asks us. You're always telling us what to do. You need to start listening with us. And just through teaching little parts of tools, of ways to deal with anxiety, to gain that trust, is so huge for them. Because I'll tell you right now, I've worked in every community, and even right now, doing some work up in Canoe Lake and Pachinak recently. It's just that idea that they need a place, a safe place. And sometimes it's not on a title of a counselor's door. You know, it could be driving around or going in the bush and having tea. But they just need someone to listen and not to judge what's going on. Like Joseph and Doreen were saying, you know, we can't judge. We can't say, oh my God, you know, you're smoking weed, like you stink, get out of here, you know. I have clients that walk in my office half the time, and it's like we just go sit outside because that's what they're using for coping, and you need to just sit down and listen sometimes for a while and say, look, I can help you, I'll listen to you, and let's try and figure this out together. The last thing I'll mention is we've had treatment facilities, and a shout out to Spuddy, to Alan Moran. He coordinates the NADAP workers for the Northwest side, and he's done the work with us as well for our healing work. And he says, I've worked in treatment centers, and it used to be 28 days. When you had an alcohol problem, you went for 28 days, but now we're looking at 5 months minimum when you're on meth or crack or whatever prescription pills. Like the kids that I'm dealing with, we think of drug dealers as these scary, dark hooded people that are coming from New York or Brooklyn or somewhere. And you know what? Sometimes it's our elders in our communities that are selling their prescription drugs to our young people. That's the reality in some of our communities, because, we're in dire straits, all of us. It's not just the youth, it's every age, the parents, the grandparents. And I don't like to dwell on the idea of talking about trauma, but the idea that the healing is passed on as well through our generations. We have the answers. Teaching the skills for grounding ourselves. How do I do that every day? I can meditate when I pour my cup of coffee in the morning. I can meditate, and I can think about my day, and I can just relax and do things. And teaching those simple tools for how to manage my anxiety is a start. And we really believe that with our program we've developed, it can go year round. It can go following those 13 moons. It's not just a 5-day retreat. You come out and you're done. You're never really done. Every day you need to be practicing these things to stay healthy. And as facilitators as well, it's not just for the youth, the clients. Even as facilitators, when we do this work, we're being triggered because we have our own stuff. Who's helping the frontline workers? Who's helping people like us that are actually doing this work? Because we need grounding after we do this work. So there's levels like that we need to look out for each other as well. Who's helping the guy that runs the sweat ceremonies after he does a ceremony? Like, that's tough work. That's really hard work. And to be able to look after each other that way at all these different levels. But the program that we came up with, we call it Maskikinianan. We are the medicine. All of us are the medicine. Every living thing. We don't need to look outside of ourselves. It's in us. If we can just help each other to stop and listen and learn and work together. So I thought I would just put that plug in there. I can talk a little bit more about that program maybe in the coming days, but just so that people are aware that we do have that program. And we're hoping, like Doreen is saying, that we can come up with committees here and say, look, all we need to do is refer you, because we still have people that are referring young people who are suicidal to the Dubé Center in Saskatoon. And thankfully there's a place to do that, but it's not the right place for our kids, because a lot of times they go there and they learn how to do it right from people that are those are the horror stories. We hear our kids coming back, and then they come back, and then what happens, and same thing with treatment. They're asking for our work to be added on to the treatment of people that are out there to do aftercare, because a lot of our people suffering with addictions come out and you feel like you're better, you're doing better, but you're coming back to exactly the same situation that you left, and you've changed, but the people that you come back to are still the same. And how do I deal with that? So there has to be some kind of transition for for people that are coming out of addictions recovery and not just going straight back into their community. Sometimes they need a path. And that's how our team is ready to help with that for however long, could be 2 weeks or a month or 3 months, you know, and that's our hope, is that we can start working together, even with tiny homes. You know, maybe they need to have a home and they could build it on their own. And I just want to put a plug in. I'll put my hand up for the Arctic Games. As a classroom teacher at Valley View School, I'd sit there and honest to God, I'd watch these kids paddling by from Saskatoon in an outward bound, and I'd say, for God's sake, we're in the north. Why don't we have a year-round program for our kids to be taking high school credits or university, whatever, some kind of training like that? So that was my dream when I graduated. I wanted to be in Katimavik, but just so happened that year it shut down. So I missed out on that. But I always believe that as part of our history, I'd like to go all the way, like Methy Portage, all the way down to Big River, or even all the way to Hudson Bay. Like do those, what was that called a couple of years ago when they had those big canoes and people came and they did the whole, all the stops along the way. That was awesome. I think that that's something we could think about and teach our kids about the history around that. So that's my plug for now.
Yeah, that was called Canoe Quest, I believe. It was
Yeah.
centennial event, I believe. But again, even this year, Cumberland House is celebrating its 250 years. And in 2026 will be Alacross will be celebrating its 250 years. So maybe a canoe quest and revisiting our historical spaces as well, or our camps. That's all proper healing. Marie, thanks for sharing. That's awesome. We have a newcomer that's joined us, Grant. Grant, I don't know if you're willing to unleash your mic and share us a few words, but or if you have any questions, but maybe introduce yourself and we'll start with that. Grant, come on in.
I've unleashed my mic. That's a good way to put it. Not sure you wanted that. So yeah, hello everyone. I'm just wanting to listen more than anything, but if you want to know who I am, where I am, is that more what you're asking? So I am a friend of Marie's since 1988, and so we've kind of stayed in touch there. So it's where we met was at Newman Theological College back then, an age-old program of adult education, a mix of that. So I am originally a farmer in Manitoba. I've studied agriculture at the University of Manitoba years ago. Actually worked in the Catholic Church full time, probably for, I want to say 15 years before I had to find my way out. I went on to get a social work degree and worked in social sciences. And most of the time I was either executive director of not-for-profits or businesses for a lot of my life. Retired now, live in Vancouver Island for the winter to avoid the -30s in Edmonton, where we stay for the summer. And so we feel very fortunate. I'm married to my wife, Lynette, who 35 years or plus. And we enjoy it here. And so I get to do what I want when I want for the first time in 50 years or 40 years. So I enjoy that. My current work, as I call this next season, I'm trying to find out where to put my energy. I've belonged to an organization called the Club of Budapest out of Hungary, and then led me to the Deep Time Network at Yale University, and then the Human Energy Project out of University of San Francisco. I'm involved with the Deep Time Network as kind of our Canadian rep, if you will. And it's just around how do we use human energy to heal? How do we use the human energy to create a worldwide communication system of positivity, where we're finding there's a lot of really good things happening, a lot of very effective people doing very good work, but we are not connected. And so some are overlapping and some are competing with government, competing with systems that don't work anymore. So I can, I mean, I hope I'm not too forward here, but I left the Catholic Church many, many, many years ago and actually led a few groups on how to walk that, how to get out of the guilt and out from under all of the patriarchy and the oppression and the first story, which is religious. In the Human Energy Project, we're quite interested in developing what would be called a third story, how we're connected to the universe, how we are part of the universe. We don't need to be redeemed from the earth. We, in fact, need to join it more with the creation story. And so we're finding stories of women, stories of Indigenous people being crucial to that awareness, crucial to the development of the third story. And so lots of my reading now, my interaction with people has to do with that.
Thank you, Grant. Your last name again?
Kaminsky, Kaminski.
Well, welcome. We're here for the next 3-4 days after this. We want to kind of snowball the ideas, maybe, trigger some other ideas to come on board, but we have some speakers scheduled along the way as well. I wanted to just clarify a statistic, and Candace could help me with this. Candace, what's our ability in the maternity wards of delivering a child in northern Saskatchewan? What's our status?
The closest place right now is Meadow Lake, but they're still sending most patients to Saskatoon. So say sending them out like a week to a month to 2 weeks stay in Saskatoon with, leaving behind families, and it's making them anxious, and people can't afford to take time off work that long. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like, primary reason we are told is we have to have a physician and an anesthesiologist that can do cesarean sections. So until then, we can't have babies in the north, apparently. And our capacity that way is really, really sadly diminished. So we have to come up with new ways of, or let's put it this way, old ways doing things. So looking at ideas like birthing centers, midwives, that sort of thing, because not everybody needs a cesarean section. Very few do. I guess the last baby that would have been born in Niagara Cross was a 6-month preemie. So they just made it.
Wow.
A 1 pound, 4 ounce baby. So, and in cases like that, NICU and all of that are needed, but I'm sure that been transported south by now, and that's going to have long effects for that family, I'm sure. I did note that Joseph had his hand up when Marie was speaking, so he may want to speak on something.
Yeah, Joseph, it's wide open if you wanted to respond. No problem.
I was listening to, I forgot your name there, White Lightning.
Marie.
Marie, and about programming and the healing. I can only speak to myself. And when you were talking really interesting about the cultural aspect and getting back to our own sense of spirituality. I mean, I was born in a convent, baptized right at birth. My grandparents were Anglican. I went to live with my grandparents, so I was accepted into the Anglican Church. I turned whatever, and then I was baptized Baptist, all in an attempt to try to figure out who the heck I was. Suffered for 40 years with addiction. Had some serious trauma happen to me when I was younger. Didn't know how to deal with that. Didn't know how to come to terms with that. But it wasn't until 5 years ago. I've been in recovery for 5 years now and had a very serious heroin addiction. But it wasn't until I got to the lodge. When I got to the lodge, and I'm so thankful for this man who started teaching me. First of all, to forget everything else prior to that, what the church had tried to teach me, tell me who I was. But I started learning who I was as an Indigenous man, and the roles and responsibilities and the values. And that was great because now I'm starting to understand who I am. I put myself and was able to understand my mother, who was a residential school survivor, who tried to protect me through the 60s scoop by going out east to have me and then giving me to my grandparents, who told me that they were my mom and dad. And then at 12, 13, finding out that my sister was my mother. That's my trauma. And going back and having that foundation, having that place to be able to figure out who I was, and having that time to do that and having the support was key, because throughout my 40 years of trying to recover from that trauma and then trying to recover from addiction, I couldn't stay clean or sober for a year. It was just not going to happen. And so now I am strong in my culture. I am strong in who I am as my indigeneity, the teachings, my responsibilities. I'm a pipe carrier. That's what worked for me. I had to not think anymore of modernization, because modernization and spirituality don't mix. And these are some of the things I think that are important when we're thinking about what can we do as individualized as it can possibly be, that culture and our spirituality as Indigenous people have to be at the core. I'm a filmmaker. Whenever I make a film or I'm telling a story, or I put culture in it, I put ceremony in it. And for one reason only, and that's to give validity back to our ceremonies. Because we have generations and generations of our people who don't think our ceremonies are powerful, who don't think our ceremonies are valid because of what they were taught or what their grandparents were taught, and it's just kind of trickled down. So bringing validation back to our ceremonies and the real power that we have from the land, like Grant had mentioned, having that land-based traditional cultural healing sense is crucial. And we don't have to go down south. What's happening is now treatment is becoming a for-profit business. Treatment, because of the epidemic and because of the vastness of addiction and mental health issues right now, at least here in Manitoba. Not too sure about Saskatchewan, but there's been a big rise in treatment centers that are for-profit, costing individuals $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to attend for 2 or 3 months. And they're tapping into Jordan's principle, to get that funding to pay. So a lot of our communities, our First Nation communities, are sending their residents to these places and paying the big dollars in hopes that they recover. What I tell when I go out and do my presentations to communities, and what I tell service providers in the communities that I'm visiting, I don't care if you have 5 beds, 3 beds. We need to start treating our people at home. And because that gives them that sense of belonging and that sense of identity. Because here's what happens. When I was I've worked in addictions. I've worked in a long-term place here in Winnipeg. We'd have residents there for 15 months doing fantastic, working in their jobs, solid, got their families back. The CFS cases have been closed, and then they go home to their community. And within 6 months to 8 months, we either hear they're relapsed or they're dead, because there was nothing for them to go back to. I have a daughter right now that's in a program. So I'm going to fix up her house. Gonna paint, fix all the walls, put some new stuff in, so that when she comes home, it's new. It's newer than it was when she left. And I think that's what we need to do when we're thinking about how we reintegrate people that are coming back from centers or whatever. I'm telling them, put a committee together. If somebody's willing to go to treatment for 3 months, then go fix up their house. You know, so that when they come back, they have something good. You know, and it's not full of the memories of the horrors and the trauma that they had to survive in that house before they went to treatment. These were some of the changes that I had to make in my life that have given me some of the success. I tell my wife my recovery is more important than her. I tell my kids my recovery is more important than them. It's more important than my job. It's more important than anything, because without my recovery, I have nothing. The hardest thing that I had to do was make recovery more important than my son's death, because that one almost broke me. Not only like if he was sick or if it was a car accident, you know, it would have been easier to accept, but he died from a drug that I was addicted to for so long. You know, he died from making a bad choice, you know, trusting somebody, and it killed him. And I had to look at my wife and I say, you know, I can't let this change me. You know, I was a bad character at one time. I mean, Rick is my married to my cousin. You know, we're family. So there's been some stories about Joe Forey out there that, you know, my God, I hope he can survive. I was a bad character. And I had some old people call me up and say, you know, hey, cuz, you know, what do you need done? And I had to say nothing. Don't do nothing. You know, because I'm not that person anymore. So I had to really stay connected to my ceremonies. We'll go on a tour, 10 days, visiting 7 communities, talking to children and ripping this Band-Aid over and over and over again. The first thing I do when I come home is I go to the lodge. I go sweat. I go take care of that. I remember we were going to Cross Lake, Manitoba. And I told my wife, I said, why do I keep doing this? Like, why do I keep ripping the Band-Aid off and going and trying to help these young kids and tell Harden's story? So we went and did our thing in Cross Lake, and it was a 14-year-old boy, tears in his eyes, gave me the biggest hug, said, I'm sorry for your loss. He said, but thank you. Thank you for trying to save our lives and bringing us this information, because we didn't know. And it was that last part that I said, we didn't know, that said, okay, this is something that's really needed. They don't know about fentanyl. They don't know what's lurking in the drugs that they're taking or they're thinking about taking. So that told me that when I said earlier, the message was more important than the pain. And that's why we keep doing what we're doing, and we're hoping that this program Canada hasn't had a national anti-drug program ever. We have adopted the states say no to the drugs. Everybody remembers, hey, this is your brain on drugs, you know, and trying to scare the kids straight. We take the approach of just trying to inform them, like, you know, if you're going to do drugs, be safe about it, you know, and hopefully you don't make that choice. But going back to what Candace was saying about the land base, having that spirituality, having that component from a personal standpoint, it's paramount. You know, we need to have more of those programs in our community. We need to stop sending our people out for treatment and start healing them at home, because they will be the example for the next ones that are struggling to say, hey, look, they did it and they went there. Can I go over there, get help? And then you have 10, then you have 20, then all of a sudden you have a community that's healed, and that's based on land-based healing and spirituality. And we start undoing what residential school system has done. Not to say that our grandparents are wrong because they believe in that system, but we need to get back what is inherently ours, you know, and that's our culture, that's our identity, and that's our land, and it's land-based. And I ramble. Thank you for listening. If it made sense, I kind of did in my head. I don't know how it came out. Thanks.
No, I think it's from the heart there, Joseph, that it came from. So your words are well received. We had a new person join us, Marianne. We're getting close to the 4 o'clock mark. So I don't know, Marianne, if you want to say a few words or join us, feel free. Tawao. No, I can't hear you. And I can't see you. Okay, we can't get Mary Ann, but Marie had her hand up. Marie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Amen to that, Joseph. It's time and time again we hear when I was 19, I was trying to do like Grant said, is find out what was missing that I was questioning for so long. And when I started going into ceremony into the sweat lodge, I was 19, and at that time a lot of people were there because of they were coming off the streets in Saskatoon, coming back home and trying to sort themselves out. And a lot of it was addictions. At that time, the treatment center was still in Isle of Cross there. So a lot of them were older. And the mentors that ran the ceremonies there, I remember sitting one between rounds there in the sweat lodge, and I said, why does this work? Like, how does this help when you're addicted this way? And he said, I can't explain it. He said, but this ceremony does something to my brain. He said, it's healing me. And I can't tell you in words. It's what I feel and what I'm experiencing there. It's healing me. That's all. I can't explain it. Sometimes we can't explain it in words. But a lot of the young people that I work with in my own healing journey, that's what I found is that ceremony has that medicine that a lot of our Western ways of medical models are they're helpful, but they're not healing. And I think that's the difference, and to be able to provide opportunities for our young people to learn and not to be so afraid of that is really key in the work that we all do. But I've got Debbie texted me. She probably sat there and typed for the last half an hour because she still can't unmute herself. But she's saying, can you just please read my message? She has a message here that she'd like to for me to read. So she says, I'm Debbie Mihalitz. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important initiative. I'm a lifetime Northerner, and as you can see, even by my name, River iPhone, my identity is so tied to the water in the north, whether it's our river at CP6 or the crystal clear spring-fed lake we grew up on and still drink from. I wear many caps, but at this moment, I would like to speak as secretary of the N12 Fur Block for the past 6 years. I'm wondering if any other fur blocks are experiencing the delays from the ministry in terms of approving members' traditional resource use, or TRU, lease applications. As Marie and others have already said this afternoon, more and more youth are wanting to go back to the land. And from my perspective with the fur block, one way to do that is build their own cabin out in the bush. This requires approval from the Ministry of Environment. We see that as absurd to begin with, when people whose families have been on the land for generations must get approval from someone sitting down south in an office when they want to build a trapper's cabin on their ancestors' land. But unfortunately, that's our colonial reality, and CIRM has literally dragged cabins away from trappers who did not cross all the T's and dot all the I's to get their application approved. Part of the TRU lease application is a letter of support from the fur block, which we have been providing, but then it's out of our hands and must be approved by the ministry. However, in the past couple of years, the bureaucracy of this process has gotten even worse. We've gone from having those lease applications approved within a couple of months to over a year and a half and more. We have 3 applicants who provided all their documents in October of 2022 and are still waiting for a simple yes or no. Our fur block executive has tried all methods of communication possible, to get an answer for these applicants, even to the point of our president, Darwin Roy, traveling to Prince Albert and going personally to the office of Colton Hawks, who's been tasked with reviewing these applications and providing approvals, but still have no word. I'm hoping, especially if other fir blocks are now experiencing these extreme delays, that we could come together as a group to come up with a solution to get these approvals faster. It seems like just another barrier being thrown up for our youth to be able to become established on the land, and that's unacceptable.
Wow, what a letter. Great words. And also, no, I wasn't aware that it was taking that long for those approval. I know you see the hope that's in the applications when the people are submitting this. It's traditional family lands, and they just want to get back on the land. But if there's barriers to this, maybe we can work on a common front to address this backlog. Thanks, Marie, for sharing that. Thanks, Deb. Maybe by tomorrow you'll get your microphone or device activated for that. We have Marianne. Marianne, go up and Diniwa. I see you. Is
Yeah,
your mic on?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, Peak Squee. Let's see what you have to say. What's on your mind? What's in your heart?
What's in my heart? Well, as you know, I'm originally from Green Lake, northern Saskatchewan, and we all share the same issues, which is meth and young people dying and not really anywhere for them to go. We had another incident last week, and I call it an incident so it doesn't seem as harsh, but a young fella was finished jail and froze. So I don't know how or why, and then we had another one about a month ago in Calgary, same thing. He froze. And our homeless, they got nowhere to go. And they are our community members. And I've been involved with Métis a bit, and well, maybe more than a bit, but I'm still involved with Cratwell Métis Local, and we have the same problems with the fir block and the I think I have a meeting this week on water. They're doing the province is doing some kind of consultation on the water. So I can send you a copy of the email, Rick, and see if that's something you can join in on somehow, because you're actually crossing all the treaty territories. And everybody's the same, where, the forests are being cut and nobody's able to, say, well, you're taking our medicine, you're taking our berries, we have nowhere to pick, and that kind of thing. So everybody's the same way, but it's like the Saskatchewan government doesn't really, really care. And I haven't heard Métis Nation Saskatchewan mention anything about this, except for, always like the duty to consult is with the Métis Nation, and they're bypassing the First Nations also. So it's something that has to be addressed at some point. So
Yeah, Marianne, you're a little humble in saying you're Métis. Your heart and soul is at the Métis. So, thanks for joining us. Like we said, they're here for 3 more days. So if there's anything that strikes you or comes in terms of contacts, we're trying to network as well. We have medical health officers that are reaching out to get to communities, but the issues are just so numerous, from health crisis to trauma crisis to generational crisis, and then the supports and programs that we assume are here, the province and the federal government, because of on reserve, off reserve, there's anything synchronized in the region. So this is part of this river, is to try and bring our minds together. If there's any way, as Doreen said, if we can spring off committees or support each other on common issues, I think that would be a great support for some of us that are standing alone in the bush out here. So it's
Yeah. So and PA hospital is the worst place to take anybody. I had to move my mom out of there a couple of times. Yeah. It's not a, like if you take in, all the complaints about PA and start counting them, it's pretty brutal. Because everybody comes here, right? It's not like it's they go very many other places.
all the fly-in medical
Mhm.
services from up north all make
Yeah.
their way to PA or Saskatoon down there, right? So
Yeah.
no,
Rick,
thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I can't put my hand up. I don't know what's working with this Zoom, but I just wanted to say that in the next few days, I wouldn't mind joining as well, but with a different hat. One is that I sit on the CHAB, which is the homelessness board for both rural and remote and the Indigenous stream, and we just did our applications. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And then the other one is just housing within the region. So I just those are my three biggies: mental health, homelessness, and housing. So I had an opportunity to talk about mental health, but maybe in the next couple of days we can talk a little bit about the homelessness and what Métis Nation, they're our community entity managing the portfolio, but we're just I'd like to put a plug out there because we're looking for some more members for that board. So if you're interested, you can get a hold of Métis Nation. And there's a couple spots for a First Nations and Métis, and I think there's one spot for a rural and remote. So we need some more membership. But I think it's also important that I wear the Beaver River hat in the next few days and also talk a little bit about some of the policies and stuff, because we're hearing a lot about homelessness within our communities, but vacancies as well. And I really want to help people become aware of why that is. So looking forward to the next few days, Rick.
Awesome, Doreen. That's what we wanted to do, is make the snowball a little bit bigger as we roll into another day. I guess in closing, I've scheduled this till 4 o'clock. Jerry, I don't know if you want to say some closing words and maybe a thank you prayer for our participants today, and then we will continue again tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So maybe just to wrap it up, Jerry, I'll give you the final words. Oh, you're muted. Oh, you're mute. Yeah, there you go. Oh, just about. You got it.
Mute.
Hang on.
Iguta?
Yeah,
Iguta?
you betcha.
First of all, I wanted to say that you speak of bird conservation blocks. I think this is one of the it's colonized concept that separated people in the 30s, I believe. But I don't like that word, fur block, but that's the way we measure the fur trapping areas that people have now in the villages. And I wanted to say that like ancient trails that were used from our past forefathers, not very many are open. These are trails that were there for hundreds, possibly thousands of years even, that were used, to cross, the forest into other river systems, from one river system to another. So that's what I've noticed in the past few years. So, just something to think about. But anyway, stay. Kagagi shmono, nash komoya. Unita komantene. Kakyog na nash kom tanao. Mamiyoktat nao kapik squeak. I thank you all and really enjoyed all your ideas and stay nash kom tanao. Kagagi shmono. Takta mamo tao mo. Kipihtonan kashiniya. I would take a good Israel. Imam Tonihtamak, Mamtonima, Kumagan, do team nan Pogiti. Pogiti kap maatum. Minantaskina to the skinan, Mamam Tonihtama. Kananas kumtanan, Kakyuk Nanas Kumana, Nikoga Chin woke up. Kapiwichi Huisik. You go Sagawatama to Pigimaga, Huma Mishkano, Unega, Pumaga. Kutagawi taonama, kawitonamo, makumagan nandu team nando asumsnan. No shimna na kapinok sitsiga poni gagich kagani taugich. Uksa mais na nas kumuyan. Kakyogi sugoga pinto tauya. Big squeeze tamonan. Big squeeze tamonan. Nas kuman. Hi.
Hey. Well, it was a great honor to spend an afternoon with all of you. Thank you, Jerry, for the spiritual guidance and support. We will continue this at 1 o'clock tomorrow, and it ain't over till it's over. The youth, if you can log on, the women, the men, the elders, I think everybody matters, and we can all help each other. I'll see you tomorrow. Egose. We're signing off with participation here at CIPI Radio with Treaty 10 News, CILX, and we got Pine House been logging on as well. So about all the participants, we thank you on behalf of our communities and our families and all the camps on these rivers and lakes and our ancestors. We want to do them proud. So let's build a better future for our children and log on, give us more ideas and support each other. We shall see you tomorrow. Egorse.
Thank you.
Wednesday, I'll load up, I'll take my stuff about 12 weeks from now.